Did you know that moving into a nursing home is one of the most life-altering decisions you will ever make? At first, it seems like the logical choice: extra care, safety, and comfort. That's what they tell you, and that's what I believed too. But once I was inside, I quickly realized that the reality was far from what I had imagined. It's not just about where you live, it's about who you are and how you experience life. If you're considering a nursing home for yourself or a loved one, I want to share 8 hard truths that no one told me before I moved in. These aren't just my regrets but the experiences of countless others who have walked this path. Read until the end, because this decision could change everything, and once you go in, getting out may not be as easy as you think. 1. The loss of independence is deeper than you expect. Before I moved into a nursing home, I took my independence for granted. It wasn't just about driving a car or managing my own finances. It was about the quiet everyday decisions that made my life uniquely mine. The simple pleasure of choosing when to wake up, what to eat, and how to spend my time gave me a sense of control, a sense of self. I never imagined that moving into a place designed to help me would strip those freedoms away so completely. At home, my days were my own. I could linger over my morning coffee, sit by the window and watch the world move, or decide on a whim to take a walk through the neighborhood. If I wanted to stay up late reading a good book, no one stopped me. If I felt like making an old family recipe, I had the freedom to do so. These weren't just routines. They were pieces of my identity, the choices that made my life feel full. But once I entered the nursing home, that quiet autonomy disappeared. Suddenly, everything was scheduled: wake-up times, meals, activities, even bedtime. I was expected to adjust to fit into a system that wasn't built for me as an individual but for the convenience of the facility. I remember the first morning I woke up there. The room was unfamiliar, the walls bare, and the air different. A staff member came in at a set time, reminding me that breakfast would be served in the dining hall soon. I wasn't hungry yet, but that didn't matter. This was the routine. And routines in a nursing home are not about personal preference. Wanting to go outside for fresh air required permission. Even choosing what to wear felt like a struggle when caregivers, trying to be helpful, laid out clothes for me as if I were incapable of making the decision myself. At first, I resisted. I politely asked if I could take my meals later, skip the group activities, or do things on my own time, but the answer was always the same. That's not how it works here. Over time, I learned to adapt, not because I wanted to, but because resisting became exhausting. The realization hit me hard: when you stop making choices for yourself, you start losing a part of who you are. The hardest part wasn't just following the rules but understanding that this was now my life. I had surrendered the small freedoms that once made life mine, and I hadn't even realized how precious they were until they were gone. 2. You may feel forgotten faster than you think. When I first moved into the nursing home, my family reassured me that I would never feel alone. They promised to visit often, to call regularly, and to keep me connected to the life I had always known. For a while they did. During the first few weeks, my daughter came by every Sunday, bringing my favorite snacks and chatting about her week. My grandchildren would pop in on weekends, their laughter filling the sterile halls with warmth. Friends called to check in, reminding me that I was still a part of their world. But then life moved forward for them, not for me. The visits became less frequent, and the phone calls shorter. My family was busy, as they had every right to be. My daughter had work, my grandchildren had school, and my friends had their own lives to manage. No one intentionally abandoned me, but as the weeks turned into months, I could feel the shift. I remember sitting in the common room one afternoon, watching as another resident stared at the door, waiting for someone who never came. She straightened her blouse, smoothed down her hair, and checked the time every few minutes, her anticipation slowly turning to disappointment. I knew that feeling all too well. It starts with optimism. You tell yourself that maybe today is the day. Then, as the hours pass, you make excuses for them. They must be running late, maybe something came up. But deep down, you know the truth. The hardest part wasn't that they didn't love me. It was realizing that my absence from their daily lives made it easier for them to move on without me. I used to be a central figure, someone they relied on, someone they needed, but now I was someone they visited when time allowed, a part of their past rather than their present. Holidays were especially painful. I spent my first Thanksgiving in the nursing home dressed in my nicest outfit, sitting in the dining hall waiting. My family had said they would try to come, but I already knew they wouldn't. Plans changed, excuses were made, and I ended up eating my meal with other residents who were also waiting for someone who never arrived. The room was filled with forced smiles and quiet resignation. Loneliness doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in slowly until one day you wake up and realize that the world outside has continued without you. I never imagined that I could feel so invisible while still being alive. If you think a nursing home will keep you from feeling lonely, think again, because once you are out of sight, it is far too easy to become out of mind. 3. You start losing your sense of purpose. Before I moved into the nursing home, my life had rhythm, structure, and meaning. It wasn't just about keeping busy. It was about feeling useful, about knowing that each day had a reason to begin. Even the smallest tasks held significance. I took pride in making my own coffee, watering my plants, and straightening up my living room just the way I liked it. I had people who depended on me, even in small ways. A neighbor who needed help with her groceries, a friend who called for advice, a family that looked to me for guidance. But in the nursing home, everything changed. My daily routines, the very things that gave my life momentum, were stripped away. Meals were prepared and placed in front of me at scheduled times. My room was cleaned while I sat idly by. My laundry was taken and returned without me lifting a finger. At first, it seemed like a relief, a chance to finally rest, to let others take care of me after years of taking care of others. But that relief was short-lived. Without responsibilities, without choices, the days stretched endlessly. I woke up in the morning not because I had things to do, but because that was the routine. I ate meals not because I had prepared them, but because they were placed in front of me. I sat in common areas not because I had somewhere to be, but because I had nowhere else to go. I started to feel like a spectator in my own life, watching the days pass but never truly participating in them. I wasn't the only one. I met a man named Walter once, a proud mechanic who had spent his life fixing things, solving problems, and using his hands to create. But here, there was nothing for him to fix, no tools, no projects, no challenges. He would sit for hours staring at his hands, hands that had once been strong and skilled but now trembled with inactivity. One day, he looked at me and said, "I used to feel needed. Now I just feel like I'm waiting." That's the quiet tragedy of losing your sense of purpose. Not just that you have nothing to do, but that you start questioning why you should do anything at all. The mind slows down, the body follows, and soon you begin to disappear into the routine of a place that was never meant to feel like home. Purpose isn't just about staying busy, it's about feeling like you matter. And in a nursing home, finding that feeling again is harder than I ever imagined. 4. Your health may decline faster than expected. Before I moved into the nursing home, I was doing well for my age. I wasn't as strong as I used to be, but I could still take care of myself. I walked every day, even if it was just around my house. I cooked my own meals, which kept me moving, stretching, and using my hands. I kept myself busy, and in doing so, I kept myself capable. I assumed that a nursing home would provide even better care, helping me stay active and healthy for as long as possible. What I didn't realize was that help can sometimes do more harm than good. When I first arrived, everything was designed for ease. I no longer had to cook, clean, or move around much at all. Meals were delivered, assistance was always available, and I was encouraged to rest. At first, it felt like a well-earned break, but slowly I began to notice the changes. Without my usual routine of walking to the kitchen, my legs grew weaker. Without the need to stand, stretch, my back stiffened. I spent more time sitting than I ever had before, and the less I moved, the harder it became to move at all. Tasks that once felt effortless, getting out of a chair, walking to the bathroom, even standing for long periods, started to feel difficult. My muscles, once maintained through simple daily movement, began to shrink. I wasn't the only one. I watched other residents, people who had arrived walking on their own 2 feet, gradually become dependent on canes, then walkers, and then wheelchairs. The more help they received, the less they did for themselves. I met a woman named Helen, who was full of life when she first moved in. She insisted on walking outside every day, claiming she wouldn't let age slow her down. But after a few months, she started using a walker, then she relied on a wheelchair. One day, she admitted to me in a whisper, "I don't know when it happened, but I feel like I aged 10 years in just a few months." It wasn't just our bodies that were slowing down. When you stop having reasons to move, your mind slows too. I found myself losing motivation. Why push myself when everything was already done for me? Why insist on struggling when help was always just a button away? But that's the danger. When you stop using your strength, you start losing it. And once it's gone, getting it back is far harder than anyone tells you. I never thought I would feel older simply by changing where I lived, but in the nursing home, aging seemed to speed up. I had more care but less life. 5. The loss of privacy and dignity. I spent my entire life valuing my privacy. My home was my sanctuary, a place where I could close my door, sit in silence, and exist on my own terms. I never had to ask permission to take a bath, to wake up when I pleased, or to spend the afternoon lost in thought without interruption. I never once considered that something as fundamental as privacy could be taken from me until I moved into a nursing home. From the moment I arrived, I felt like I had entered a world where personal space was no longer my own. My room, though technically mine, was subject to frequent checks from staff. There was always someone coming in, sometimes knocking, sometimes not. They were doing their jobs. I understood that. But it didn't change how it made me feel. A stranger entering my space without my control or invitation reminded me that I was no longer truly independent. Getting dressed, something so personal and private, became a task I could no longer always do alone. Sometimes I was expected to wait for assistance, even if I didn't want it. Other times I was encouraged to take shortcuts for the sake of efficiency. Wouldn't it be easier if we helped? What they didn't understand was that it wasn't about ease, it was about dignity. The bathroom, once a place of solitude, became another source of discomfort. Some residents had to press a button and wait for someone to help them. I watched people, once proud and self-reliant, grow frustrated at having to ask for permission to perform the most basic human functions. The waiting, the lack of control, the quiet humiliation of needing help for things they once did in private, it chipped away at their sense of self. Then, there was the issue of sharing a space with a stranger. Not everyone gets a private room. I was lucky to have a kind roommate, but I heard stories of others who were not so fortunate. People placed with individuals who yelled in their sleep, who lacked personal hygiene, or who had cognitive issues that made peaceful rest impossible. Even with the best roommate, there was no escaping the fact that I had lost something precious: the ability to close a door and be truly alone. Dignity is a quiet thing. You don't notice it when you have it, but you feel its absence deeply when it's gone. I never realized how much of mine I would lose by moving into a nursing home. No one warned me that even the simplest moments, bathing, dressing, resting, would become things I had to share, request, or surrender. I had prepared for many things in old age, but I had not prepared for the slow erosion of privacy that came with it. 6. Realizing it's harder to leave than you think. When I first moved into the nursing home, I told myself it was temporary. I thought I would give it a try, see how it felt, and if I didn't like it, I could always leave. That belief made the decision easier. I convinced myself that I had options, that nothing was permanent. But what I didn't realize was that once you go in, leaving is much harder than you think. At first, it was just a matter of adjustment. I missed my home, my space, my freedom, but I told myself I could get used to it. The staff reassured me that I would feel more comfortable over time, that this new routine would become familiar, and in some ways, it did. But as the months passed, I began to feel something deeper, a quiet, creeping loss of control. The home I had left behind no longer felt like mine. My children had already begun making decisions about it, selling furniture, rearranging things, discussing what to do with the property, without me there to maintain it. The house started to feel more like a place from my past than a place I could return to. Then there was my own body. The less I did for myself, the more I depended on the care around me. I no longer cooked, no longer walked as much, and no longer made the daily choices that kept me strong and engaged. The longer I lived that way, the harder it became to imagine living alone again. My confidence started to slip. Would I still be able to manage on my own? Would I be safe? The nursing home, despite everything I disliked about it, had made me dependent in ways I never expected. I met others who had the same realization. Some had moved in thinking they would only stay for a short time while recovering from an illness or injury. But as time passed, they never left. The longer they stayed, the more difficult it became to go back to their previous lives. Some no longer had homes to return to. Others had lost too much strength, too much independence, too much belief that they could take care of themselves. I had always assumed that if I didn't like it, I could simply pack my things and walk out, but I hadn't considered the quiet forces that keep people here. The slow decline of ability, the loss of confidence, the way life outside keeps moving forward without you. Leaving isn't just about making the decision, it's about having the strength, both physically and emotionally, to rebuild a life that has already started slipping away. By the time you realize that, it might already be too late. 7. The food is nothing like home-cooked meals. Before moving into the nursing home, I never thought much about food beyond its basic purpose, nourishment. I cooked for myself for years, not always elaborate meals, but meals that carried a sense of comfort and routine. The smell of bacon sizzling in the morning, the warmth of homemade soup on a cold day, the satisfaction of making something just the way I liked it. I had the freedom to choose what I wanted, when I wanted, and how much I wanted. I never considered that something as simple as food could be taken away from me in a way that would leave me feeling so disconnected from my own life. At first, the idea of not having to cook seemed like a relief. No more grocery shopping, no more standing at the stove, no more dishes to clean. But what I didn't anticipate was that food in a nursing home isn't just different, it's impersonal. Meals are prepared in bulk, designed for efficiency rather than enjoyment. There's little variety, little seasoning, and no consideration for personal preferences beyond dietary restrictions. I remember my first meal there, a plate of food that looked fine but tasted like nothing. I took a bite and realized something was missing. It wasn't just the flavors. It was the feeling of familiarity. This wasn't my food, this wasn't the taste of home. And worse, there was no way to change it. The menu was set, and my choices were limited to what was served that day. If I didn't like it, I could go hungry or settle for a pre-approved alternative that wasn't much better. It wasn't just about the food itself, it was about the loss of ritual. The small but meaningful act of preparing something for myself was gone. I missed the way I used to stand in my kitchen, choosing ingredients, stirring a pot, tasting as I went. I missed the ability to make something special just because I felt like it. The simple act of cooking had been part of my identity, and now, like so many other things, it was gone. I wasn't alone in feeling this way. Other residents would reminisce about their favorite meals, about the dishes they used to make for their families. Some even talked about how they wished they could cook just one more time, just to feel that connection to their past. Food is more than sustenance. It's memory, it's culture, it's a piece of who we are. And when that is taken away, you realize that something as simple as a homemade meal is more valuable than you ever knew. 8. Once you move in, leaving is harder than you think. Before I moved into the nursing home, I reassured myself that it wasn't permanent. I told myself that if I didn't like it, I could always leave. That thought made the decision easier. I wasn't giving up my independence. I was just adjusting my circumstances. But what I didn't realize was that leaving wasn't just a decision. It was a battle against time, against my own limitations, against the quiet changes that made returning to my old life harder than I ever expected. At first, I still felt like myself. I had every intention of staying active, keeping my mind sharp, and maintaining my independence. But as the days turned into weeks, something shifted. The structure of the nursing home, meant to be helpful, slowly wore down my self-sufficiency. Meals were brought to me, so I no longer had to cook. Assistance was readily available, so I stopped struggling to do things on my own. Walking outside required permission and supervision, so I did it less and less. I convinced myself I was simply adjusting, but in reality, I was becoming dependent in ways I never had been before. Then there was the matter of my home, the place I had left behind, believing it would always be there if I wanted to return. But life outside moved on without me. My children, trying to be helpful, started making decisions about the house, selling furniture, packing belongings, and discussing what to do with the property. It wasn't done with bad intentions, but I realized too late that my home was no longer truly mine. Even if I left the nursing home, returning to the life I once had was no longer an option. For some, the obstacles to leaving are financial. Nursing homes are expensive, and once money is drained, options become limited. For others, the barrier is physical. Months or years of limited movement weaken the body, making independent living seem impossible. But for most, the biggest obstacle is psychological. When you live in a place that slowly takes away your choices, you stop believing you are capable of making them. The world outside starts to feel distant, unfamiliar, and even intimidating. I had once believed that a nursing home was just a temporary solution, a place I could leave whenever I chose. But I now understand that most people don't leave, not because they don't want to, but because by the time they do, too much has changed. They have changed, and the life they once knew is no longer waiting for them. The choice that changes everything. Looking back, I don't regret growing older. Aging is a privilege, something not everyone gets to experience. But what I do regret is believing that a nursing home was my only option. I walked in thinking I was making the safest choice, the most practical decision for my future. I told myself that it was the responsible thing to do, that I was easing the burden on my family, that I would still have a good quality of life. What I didn't realize was that quality of life is about more than being cared for. It's about having something worth waking up for every day. When I moved in, I thought I was simply changing my surroundings. I didn't realize I was also giving up pieces of myself, my independence, my privacy, my sense of purpose. I assumed that I could still hold on to the things that made my life meaningful, but I didn't understand how slowly, almost imperceptibly, those things would slip away. The little routines that once gave my days structure were replaced by schedules that weren't my own. The relationships I thought would remain strong faded as life outside moved on without me. The choices I once made freely became privileges granted only when convenient for the facility. People often think of nursing homes as places of safety, where everything is taken care of, and in some ways that's true. There are always people around, and there's always a system in place to ensure that your basic needs are met. But there is a difference between existing and truly living. A roof over your head, meals prepared for you, assistance when needed, these things keep you alive, but they don't necessarily make life fulfilling. I didn't fully understand that until I was already here. I wish someone had told me that once you give up control over your life, getting it back is almost impossible. That once you stop making decisions for yourself, people stop asking for your input. That once you leave the world you knew behind, returning to it may not be as simple as you think. I wish I had fought harder to find alternatives, to ask for help while still keeping my independence, to explore options that didn't involve giving up so much of what made me me. Does that mean nursing homes are all bad? No. For some, they are necessary. There are people who truly need the level of care they provide. But I want you to understand something. Moving into a nursing home isn't just a change of address. It is a change in the way you experience life. If you are considering it, ask yourself, is this truly the best choice for me, or just the easiest? Am I doing this because I have no other option or because I believe it will improve my life? The answer to that question matters. If I could do it over, I would have searched for ways to stay in my home longer. I would have sought help while keeping my independence intact. I would have asked myself what truly mattered to me, not just what was convenient for others. Because now I know that once you trade freedom for security, you may never be able to get it back. These lessons are meant to inspire you to live fully and authentically. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Take a moment to reflect and share one thing you've learned and plan to apply in your own life. Let's support each other on this journey toward embracing these truths. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment with 1. If not, feel free to comment with 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and here's to living life on your own terms.